Dear viewers, welcome to our series Visit. And today we have a very interesting email from a viewer, not a patient, which reached me these days. And I am very, very happy to answer this letter now. But thank you all for the numerous letters again, and I am always grateful to receive these emails. They are the basis for every single Visit episode. Valerie wrote to me, and Valerie informed me that she finds it very valuable to get this information over and over again. That's incredibly nice, because the law of resonance applies in life, and it's nice that people are allowed to meet, even if this encounter is only one-sided. But for the better understanding of many things just for yourself, you are able to take a lot of valuable things into your own hands and perhaps understand better why life is suddenly knocking at the door on a different level. Illness announces itself. And nevertheless, in your best knowledge and conscience, you may be doing things and getting more clarity now. So she wrote she is 45 years old, single mother with 2 sons and smoker. Thanks for the sincerity. She has had severe arthrosis in the area of the left thumb joint for about 20 years. Arthrosis in both knees, some of which are and remain pain-free. But radiologically arthrosis is confirmed. Since she was a teenager, she has had a severe weakness of the connective tissue. Temporarily, heartburn occurs again, and also Achilles tendon pain on the left side. You further describe that you say, in November 2020, a copper chain was removed, and psoriasis appeared, but 6 months later it disappeared. It wasn't until July 2021 that it started again on the elbows and left knee. You've been taking zeolite for 2 months. So zeolite, you all know. A puff rock, which very strongly binds toxins, but also has a very balancing effect in the organism due to its high effect on the ions within our acid-base balance, but also within the framework of mineral metabolism, because the zeolite is incredibly valuable to always ensure a balance here. You write that you have no amalgam fillings and that you have not had a vaccination since 2018. You are a vegetarian. You also don't eat fish. So no meat, no fish since 2019. You only drink filtered water, sometimes a glass of wine at the weekend, and you exercise a lot. Alright, I'll take that as a basis and try to share my thoughts with you here, to maybe get a little more understanding of these things. On the one hand, I have to tell you honestly, the most important thing with good cooperation between doctor and patient are always the things that are only the anamnesis. So, everything you know about the patient is very helpful in understanding. I mean to say that if you give yourself 45 minutes or an hour, 80% of the diagnosis is already there if you only listen to a person. Now that's not a lot of information, but I'd like to give you my feedback on it. At the end of your email, you write what you do really well and what is also really good. Because it's really good that you don't have any amalgam. It's really good that you exercise a lot. And it's also really good to drink filtered water. But what's not really good is smoking. But I want to have understanding for a process, which means raising 2 boys as a single mother, which means for yourself to put yourself second, and have a 24-hour presence, to 2 who want to get out there in life, who of course want to be seen with their individual, good and not so good things. Everyone needs great love, care, devotion. That's where you lose yourself, and that's where you can lose yourself. And sometimes it's the cigarette that pretends that you then relax with it. But that actually has to follow as point number 5 on the good things, where it says, I used to be addicted to nicotine. You can go through deep valleys in life, but the great awareness that you develop at 45 must really have a consequence here too. Because you are slowly laying the foundation for how you will be doing in 10 and 20 years. And that time has taken and endured incredible things from you. And sometimes I think to myself, our body should have a self-defense protection system. I don't know if you understand what I mean. That if it's already degenerating into arthrosis, if it clinically signals psoriasis at the symptomatic level, if it has recurrent heartburn, I don't want to blame it all on the cigarette. This is a multicausal process. But it should have such a self-defense system that it says, every time I see through my eyes that you're holding a cigarette in the right hand, the left should give you a slap in the face. Or if I have another glass of wine tonight, which might do me good in the evening, but maybe there will be more and every evening, then I'd have to kick myself, because my body would have a chance to reply that it just doesn't want it and that it no longer has the strength to compensate for these things. And I also want to have understanding for what was. But I would ask you from the bottom of my heart. Start to decrease your burden. Maybe now the boys are slowly going into life too. At 45, that can still take a bit of time. But please take care of yourself a bit more. Everything that's good down there is not enough now if you read the first part. Because you must not forget that a person who is in 10 years of stress, and I don't read the word stress at all. You just stated the facts. In addition, there is a really latent hyperacidity. What is hyperacidity? Hyperacidity means my body adapts to my life, produces acetic acid, stomach acid, carbonic acid, uric acid. The program is trimmed for performance. In other words, an incredibly great balance is being lost for me. Hyperacidity means on a cellular level, there is a microcirculation disorder. The intestine itself gets into a dilemma, it has to keep a balance. And if in addition there is a nutritional deficit. And you write that you have been a vegetarian since 2019, which is 2 or 3 years now, and that you eat neither fish nor meat. Then I don't see it with such great joy. Because, and now let's show the slide, because the liver's detoxification pathways depend on that they have sufficient amino acids, that you supply sufficient vitamin B12. And I don't know if what you're doing is sufficient. That means, if I'm under big pressure in life, the body is incredibly unforgiving when it is not supplied with what is elementary, if it doesn't have everything ready. And now I don't have enough B12, for example, to then really guarantee a process at the biochemical level in phase 2, all the conjugation processes to make it renal, then it can only store it. Then it can only put it into its connective tissue, then it can absorb it at the cellular level. And you know full well that aluminum and many things pass the brain barrier. Our mobile network is disturbing the blood-brain barrier. So I would like to ask you to have at least your methylmalonic acid checked to find out whether the cell still has enough vitamin B12 left. How high and how good can you really grant your share of essential amino acids, so protein? It's not that easy, and above all, things are not so easy in such high-stress situations. Believe me, I've practiced everything in my life. Personally, I was the meat eater. And when there used to be slaughter festivals, I went there. I loved it, and always such a sandwich with cold cuts. That was better than any sweet stuff. And then I started to concern myself more with pork, and then the phase got the better of me. I don't want that, I don't want to allow that for the animals, and I don't support this animal husbandry. And then, for 15 years, I was a vegetarian, but I didn't do it properly at the time. And I realized that with my workload, with incredible joy, but this workload was bigger than my body had given way energetically, and I made my personal experiences. And even today I put the focus on balance. And we all have different needs at different stages of our lives. And we all have to ensure that our body can also serve us, that it can master these demands of life with us. And if there are deficits, which now only occur on the nutritional level because the diet is too one-sided. On the other hand, maybe the absorption conditions in the organism change. For example, in the stomach we have a very stable pH of 1.4. In the small intestine 8.5, and in the large intestine 5.5 to 6.5. But only when it is 5.5 to 6.5 in the small intestine, ammonia can be excreted. Ammonia is actually the byproduct of protein metabolism. And ammonia is much higher because I have to eat a much higher amount of protein at the plant level. That means more lenses, more beans to have the same effect in the frame of my quantitative protein supply than for the structure. Proteins donate energy, these are the energy sources, protein and fat, for life. I don't need carbs. This has an effect on the ammonia excretion. This has an effect on the reflux, the hyperacidity. And if now, for example, increase the pH value due to an imbalance in the large intestinal environment, if I make it much more alkaline, I can't excrete ammonia. These processes have an effect on the intestinal mucosa. That means, are absorption conditions still given? Are there perhaps also permeability disorders in the intestine, which on the other hand, of course, now burden the body on a physical level? I say this because psoriasis is an autoimmune condition. And the autoimmune event, that the body exerts a certain flammability against or a certain attack against itself, we often say medically. That is not true. It would never do that. But quietly, it may no longer be able to fend off toxins. Part of the autoimmune process is always an intestine, which is not 100% capable of its high metabolic and immune performance. This includes toxic loads. You wrote you don't have amalgam fillings, but you've had a copper chain for years. Well, hello. How can you think that it is a process that is only local? Not at all. Not at all. If that is inserted into the uterus, then this constant copper can have consequences for the entire organism. We not only know Wilson's disease, that too much copper is stored in the liver, but it can even lead to functional liver disorders. Inflammatory processes, joint problems, joint pain, respiratory diseases, actually increased highly toxic oxidative stress. Copper is also the element that is the opposite of manganese. And copper and manganese are mutually dependent. This means, if I now have a lot of copper and then the corresponding manganese is no longer sufficiently available to the body, then the consequences are really quite dramatic. Because manganese is responsible for the fascia, manganese is responsible for the joints. At 45 you have severe arthrosis. We classify arthrosis as wear and tear or degeneration. This is an internal metabolic problem. Supply problem, tension, hyperacidity makes a different microcirculation. When the capillaries are tense, the oxygen supply is no longer balanced. These are really all incredibly important things. And if I now come back to manganese, that is one of the 5 highest quality metals and one of the 12 fundamentally important elements, or in the 12th place for our organism in small trace form. But without manganese, urea, for example, cannot be further broken down. Urea is an end product in this protein energy metabolism, or glutamine synthetase. This is an enzyme that catalyzes glutamic acid and ammonia into glutamine, so the corresponding degradation is granted. Manganese regulates immune functions, manganese regulates cartilage, joint and fascial health. Manganese is important for bone growth, for blood clotting, for hemostasis as part of our antioxidant defense. Manganese has a high function, a control function in energy metabolism, and also regulates our blood sugar. But for God's sake, don't think I have to take manganese. But of course there are also enough foods like rice and legumes and nuts, whole grains, chocolate, tea, vegetables that contain manganese, and it's the traces we need. And it is the background that needs to be noticed. What can I do to really counteract a degenerative process? And that's where I come to the question, if I lead a life for more than 10 years that incredibly needs me, that really put a certain amount of pressure on me, then there is a general tension. Where is the sufficient relaxation? What does my body want and expect from me? Because all the fascia, that's the tissue, the connective tissue that runs through our entire body. And the fascia has an incredible influence on it. To a state that ultimately also affects our diet, our breathing, also the mental state, unresolved limitations. In this overall picture and tenses the structure of the fascia. And if I no longer have my momentum for life, if I no longer have my relief for life, if in this giant network of fascia that goes through the whole body, if there is tension, then the supply is on the level of our joint and cartilage function is restricted. That's why this fascia and stretching training is so incredibly important. The whole, it's called matrix, the connective tissue in its blood flow for the capillaries, for the nerves, for the lymphatic systems, for the entire connective tissue is an incredibly valuable fact. And I can just say, one thing is a lot of exercise in nature, that's great. But I can only appeal to choose yoga or a process of centralization and stretching where one revisits a journey into oneself, around the body in a good balance, relief, stretching, but also much more strength is regained with that. And I think these are incredibly important things that I can give you as a tip, especially with arthrosis, for example. In the evening, make yourself a little golden drink, and I wrote down the recipe for you now. This can be very good for you, especially with arthrosis or arthritic pain, because arthritis is the inflammation that causes us pain. Arthrosis itself usually does not cause that much pain. Being diagnosed with arthrosis does not mean that you are in pain. But just the relationship here with this drink from turmeric powder with water respectively, then really stirred into a mass, boil it up, and then afterwards put this mass every evening in a drink with sheep's milk or oat milk, and then add a teaspoon of galactose with some cinnamon, pepper and coconut oil. That's maybe a little advice to do that in the evening. But why am I talking about galactose? Galactose is a simple sugar, and galactose is a sugar that we also need when we strengthen. The connective tissue structures, whether the cartilage, whether the joints, whether the muscles, whether the collagen, whether the coagulation factors. That's what galactose is for, to regenerate and build up connective tissue structures again and again. The other thing is, the galactose strengthens the human energy metabolism. It is the building block for our nerves, for our brain. Breast milk has the highest proportion of galactose. So the child takes a leap in development, especially in the first year of life. The galactose is a sugar that never goes on the hips, but represents an energy strengthening model. All neurodegenerative diseases should take galactose. All people who notice that their memory is declining, the cognitive thinking drops, should take galactose 2 or 3 times. Simply stir a teaspoon into tea, but it has a strong regulating effect, also in the context of fat burning. These are all incredibly high-quality things to do. Look at the organism. Really keep looking now. Reduce the big toxin pressure you have every day, that you maybe still practice yourself and direct your program towards relief. Psoriasis is an autoimmune disease, and we now know that the vitamin D metabolism plays a very important role. Please measure vitamin D25OH. Measure vitamin D 1.25. Look at this metabolism. Dose well and high so that you get to a good level between 150, 170 nanomoles per liter. Look what kind of detoxifier you are. One is fast, the other is slow, the other is delayed. The same burdens do not mean the same burdens for everyone. Your approaches, your awareness is wonderful, but also, in the context of nutrition, look at what things should you really recognize now. That the body needs more support. And I think a lot about vitamin B12. I'm not the one who always says please substitute here. I think the most valuable thing is what's on the plate because it provides energy. A pill does not provide more energy, it can compensate purely mechanically, but the energy comes from what is on the plate. And always remember minerals, trace elements, everything must always bind to proteins. No immune cell can rebuild itself. It can't bind 100 million new red blood cells daily if the protein basis is missing. And all of this is incredibly valuable and important to have in the context of slowly getting back into balance here. And I have very, very good hope in the thought that you will slowly find your own way here and out of it with what you already have practiced now wonderfully, to be able to get much, much more out of it. And then somewhere that this psoriasis is slowly saying goodbye. It's really interesting when people just go to the Dead Sea and come back and say when I was there, then I had no more psoriasis at all for half a year. So things play a role that the body can of course fall back on in the context of its exposure to the sun. You're always in a holiday situation there, have a large area of sun radiation. So vitamin D plays a very important role here. This is certainly not extensive enough advice regarding psoriasis, but it is embedded in this large, great overall picture. And I really thank you very much for your email, and I am also very pleased and thank you all very much for this attention again today for our Visite episode. Whenever you have questions, whenever you need medical advice, please write to me at visite@qs24.tv. I look forward to any feedback and look forward to the next broadcast with you. Many thanks and all the best.